listening to music, baking something, or watching a movie, and out of nowhere, you think of a memory that you haven't thought of in forever? This experience is called nostalgia. The online definition of nostalgia is a wistful affection or sentimental longing for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. This is probably the definition, or a similar definition, that ran through your mind when I first said nostalgia. This begs the question, is nostalgia a healthy thing for a person to experience? The term nostalgia originated in 1688 by Swiss physician Johannes Hofer. He derived it from nostos, which means return to the native land, and algos, which means pain. He thought it was a medical disease afflicting Swiss soldiers. Hofer believed that it caused significant amounts of psychological and physical distress. The symptoms he claimed to see included homesickness, insomnia, physical weakness, and fever. All of the way into the 19th century, nostalgia was seen as a neurological illness, and people constantly searched for causes and cures. Medical scholars abandoned the study of nostalgia until the beginning of the 20th century, when the field of psychology grew and nostalgia became popular again. This time, psychologists did not see nostalgia as a bodily disease, but as a disorder of the mind. They stopped thinking nostalgia related to homesickness and instead simply related to someone's past. Psychoanalysis believed that you could be nostalgic about any aspect of your past that you missed. This led to people connecting nostalgia to bittersweet emotions. Nostalgia is experienced by everybody at some point in their life, whether it's once a month or multiple times a week. In the 80s, nostalgia was used in advertising, and they wondered if they could use nostalgia to entice people into buying their product. Research done by undergraduate and graduate students was studied to find the link between nostalgia and advertising. They gave charity flyers to the participants in the experiment, and some that triggered nostalgia and some that did not. The researchers placed a box so that the participants could donate to charity. The experiment showed that nostalgia can increase people's desire to give, which could be interpreted that it will probably increase their desire to consume companies' products as well. Other researchers found that people feel attached to and prefer products that they consume in their late teens to early 20s. Similarly, they found that people favor music that was popular during this age as well. Many films and television shows use nostalgia to get people emotionally attached to what they are watching, to keep an interest. A good example of this would be the television show Stranger Things. It takes people who lived in the 80s back to their good old days. Another example of this would be the movie Back to the Future. These two examples take people back in the past and remind them of things they may have forgotten about. These memories bring about positive emotions because they remember the good things that those things brought in the past. Advertisements use the same tactics. Last year, in rhetoric, we had to make an advertisement that made people want to go somewhere. I had to make them want to go to Florida, and to do this we had to use pathos and get to their emotions. Nostalgia is a way of using pathos and getting to people's emotion. People in the actual business of advertising, not just the rhetoric class, use nostalgia to capture the attention of the consumer. They found nostalgia increases people's positive emotions towards the brand and causes people to favor their product more than if they had not triggered the nostalgia. Research on consumer preferences and responses to advertisements and other types of media indicate that nostalgia influences people's attitudes, behaviors, and emotions. The way that advertisers and filmmakers use nostalgia is practically unavoidable, and in turn increases the importance of learning if nostalgia is healthy for a human to experience or not. Nostalgia is often triggered when someone is experiencing distress, loneliness, meaninglessness, sadness, uncertainty, or boredom. All of these triggers are negative emotions, but nostalgia triggers positive emotions. Nostalgia can change a negative mindset to a positive mindset. Nostalgic memories tend to be about moments of happiness, times of joy, celebration, or intimacy. When nostalgic memories do involve negative experiences, people are more likely to be able to pick out the positive redeeming qualities of those experiences. One study is done to determine the effect of listening to music that was popular in an individual's youth. When they started listening to the music while in a negative mood, they were more likely to experience nostalgia than if they were in a positive mood prior to listening to the music. When I am in a bad mood or stressed, it's the tactic I usually use. I can do those Taylor I've been listening to since I was little, or Defying Gravity from Wicked because it reminds me of how I felt with my sister singing in the car. The feelings that the nostalgia from this music brings can make us feel lighter and be a temporary stress reliever. Nostalgia is restorative and uniquely emotional. This is what distinguishes nostalgia from other biographical memories. Studies have shown that when people talk about describe nostalgic memories, they use a greater number of positive emotional words than when describing other autobiographical memories. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. This verse from Proverbs makes it clear that being positive leads to being healthier. All people feel a need for belonging. For most people, having a close relationship is a primary meaning in life. The memories that get triggered are the ones that mean the most to the individual experiencing the nostalgia, and these memories are typically social in nature. It is rare for nostalgic memories not to involve close family or friends. When you think of memories that make you feel nostalgic, I bet almost all of those memories include another person sharing that experience with you. These are momentous memories. These nostalgic memories reassure us that our lives are worthwhile. Nostalgia is also social because social interactions can trigger. People love to talk about past experiences with those they shared that experience with. Indirectly makes us feel connected to people because of its ability to elevate feelings of social support, and it heightens our perceived interpersonal competence. When our need to belong feels threatened, we are more motivated to go and seek social interaction. On the other hand, belonging can also undermine this motivation for social interaction. When people feel excluded during social outings, it can decrease motivation, cooperation, and empathy with others. This can cause people to feel lonely and cause their social confidence to go down, which could in turn make them have problems for their mental health. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as are the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching." God made us to be in community with each other and worship Him together. We cannot worship God and love others to the best of our ability if we are reclusive because of a bad social experience. If nostalgia steps in, it can counteract the feelings of exclusion and loneliness by bringing you back to the emotions you felt when you did have social connection. It has the power to potentially stop the downward emotional spiral and motivate one to go and have positive social interaction. Even though nostalgia involves only the perception of positive social interaction, it can still help people in the long run not to feel lonely, which is better for their health and their walk with God. As mentioned earlier, nostalgia can increase positive feelings and self-confidence. Clay Rutledge, in his book, Nostalgia, a Psychological Resource, says, "When people feel like they know or are in touch with who they are psychologically healthier. Nostalgic memories are focused on the personal experiences that people hold dear. Nostalgia helps in situations where people's self-confidence could be undermined and when there is doubt that they know themselves. Nostalgia could help people be better and therefore live more authentic lives. Since it has been proven that people who know themselves are psychologically healthier and nostalgia contributes to knowing yourself, then nostalgia is psychologically healthy. With all this said, there still could be some negative sides to nostalgia. Considering the positive feelings that nostalgia gives you, people can get stuck in these memories and want to always feel the way they felt at that time. They may want to go back to that time in their life instead of just looking back at it fondly." For my interview, I talked to Kitty Binnick. Kitty is the executive director of the West Texas Aphasia Center and has worked there for the last 15 years. Aphasia is a disorder that affects your comprehension and communication skills. At the Aphasia Center, they help people with this disorder learn how to communicate with what abilities they have left. Kitty says that she sees nostalgia play a big role in what she does, and that often it can be a helpful part of her job, but it can also harm her patients when they refuse to learn how to deal with their new way of life. She told me that they can get stuck in their memories of when they could communicate normally, and it makes it difficult to help them. It also makes it more difficult when their family gets stuck in how their loved one used to be. This is just one example of how people can get stuck in the past. A different example of being stuck in the past can be found in Charles Dickens' book, Great Expectations. In the book, there is a boy named Pip who had an unfortunate childhood but eventually escapes his circumstances. During Pip's childhood, he met and fell in love with a girl named Estella, who was not good to him. Even though Pip had gotten away from Estella and his circumstances, his mind would keep bringing him back to her. Pip let himself get stuck in his memories with Estella instead of moving on to a future without her. Experiences cannot be relived or remade, they can only be remembered. It is unhealthy to constantly live in the past and not look to a future where experiences can be just as fond as the ones that were triggered. Nostalgia is not a problem solver, and it cannot change any negative circumstances. What I do think nostalgia can do is give you a positive mindset by looking at the good times in the past. Making decisions or talking to someone while in a negative mood usually leads to things that should not have been said and negative consequences. Nostalgia may have the power to change your mood long enough that you can hold in the negative emotions until the right time to deal with them. With all this said, I do believe that nostalgia is a healthy thing for a person to experience. Thank you.
Congratulations, you did it. With all the technological difficulties and everything, which is very distracting, so way to go. There we go. More technological difficulties, except that was my fault. So tell us about what you're going to do next year.
I'm going to Texas A&M University, and I'm studying agricultural economics.
Okay, and that seems not have a whole lot to do with nostalgia. So why did you choose this topic?
I chose it because it's something that everyone experiences, and it interests me, and I think it's fun to be nostalgic.
Okay, good. So I just want to ask you a few things to clarify, kind of to get started. So you talked in your paper about how nostalgia can be positive, but there's a negative aspect to it also. And then you've told us about how historically kind of the definition has changed. So, like, how would you define it now that you've studied it throughout this year?
I think that nostalgia is a memory that gets triggered that has positive personal associations.
Okay. And is it something that's always spontaneous, or is it something that, like, you can make happen?
I think you can cause it to happen, but I think more often it's spontaneous.
Okay. And then I may come back to that idea in a second, but tell us about what it was like studying it. Like, what is the field of nostalgia like out there when you went to do research?
Very small. There's only like one main expert on it, and that's Clay Rutledge, and he's who wrote my book. And like in every article that I read, he was always a source. And so there's not very many people that have studied it. But
and so why do you think? What's his interest? Like, what's his point in studying it, and why is there maybe a little bit of interest in making it this more academic type of subject?
I think he probably wanted to see if it was helpful or not, or if he could use it in like therapy with people and like trigger the positive emotions whenever people are like have depression or stuff like
Yeah, good. So I found that particularly fascinating. So I'm really proud of the book that Libby Ann read, because I skimmed through it and read some of it, and it's pretty dry. To be talking about something that's supposed to be so positive and happy. Sorry, Dr. Rutledge. But I think that I found that fascinating that the study mostly is about, can we use this as a tool in therapy to make people mentally healthier? And I think you dive into that, in your paper. So I was reading a book recently that there was a quote in it that said, I don't think it's all that useful to spend time thinking about the future. So do you think it's all that useful to spend time thinking about the past?
I think yes, but you can't spend too much time thinking about the past. I think it helps you look to a more positive future, but you can't get stuck in it.
What if maybe somebody's past has not been all that positive?
I think surely, even if your past has not been positive, there's some positive days you can look back on.
Okay. Then I think another thing, I think of nostalgia. I just think of this like warm, fuzzy feeling. I'm like, we've talked a lot about my nostalgic experiences through the year. I just think like it's this warm, fuzzy feeling, but it seems like there's a lot more to it than that. So would you say there's a lot more to it than just, I feel nice for the moment?
Yeah, I think it gives you like just a little boost of positivity when you think about it. And so I don't know if there's much more to it than more of a warm, fuzzy feeling, but there might be a little more to it.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about, I think the term you used was autobiographical memories. And you talk about the difference between like remembering and nostalgia. Mm-hmm. So could you just give us a little more clarification on that?
Okay. I think nostalgia has to be like triggered by one of your five senses, but just like thinking of a memory or like remembering like, oh, I need to go to the store today. That's not nostalgia. It wasn't triggered and it doesn't give you any like positive feelings or anything like that.
Or if I like intentionally am examining something in the past, I'm guessing that wouldn't be nostalgia because I'm sitting just contemplating it. It's not associated with necessarily this positivity that like you're talking about. Do you think that there's a difference in importance between like just remembering and nostalgia? Like what's the value in each of those? Are they both valuable?
Well, remembering is valuable because you usually have stuff to do and you need to remember to do those things.
Yes.
And then nostalgia, it brings you like the positive emotions and makes you think of good times in the past.
Okay. I think I'm going to pass it on and then come back to some other questions.
All right, great job. Mr. Zinkgraf gave you some good advice about breathing. I'm taking that advice as well. So, when I first read your paper and saw or heard you basically talking about your memories with your sister and music, of course, I instantly became nostalgic and had similar memories of my own. And so, first of all, I have two why questions kind of about your playlist that you mentioned there. First of all, why Defying Gravity? Second of all, Why Taylor Swift? I'm just stirring the pot.
Well, Laura Kate was like really obsessed with Defying Gravity for one summer, and I don't really know why. But we listened to it like 5 times on the way to College Station when I was dropping her off to college, and it was just really fun.
Awesome.
So now I always think of her with it. And Taylor Swift, because it's good.
Define your terms, Libby Ann. That's right. That's a whole other oral. No, I'm just playing. Well, okay. Very, very good. Let me just see here for a minute. As you've been researching, did you come across or come away with any impressions as to kind of how we as modern people intuitively react to this idea of nostalgia? Is it generally a positive attitude or a negative attitude? Anything that...
I think it's generally a positive attitude. I think people like thinking about good times in the past.
Yeah.
And especially when you're talking to people about it.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to sing together.
Yeah. I guess maybe I'm a little bit cynical being a little bit older, because sometimes I've seen that sometimes it gets confused with being, just a sentimental old fool, you're with nostalgia, that sort of thing. Do you think, you mentioned about like advertising and how it's used. Is there some manipulation there, you think, that...
Yeah. I mean, all companies want you to buy their products, so they might as well use the tools they have.
Right. Right, yeah, this is true. Yeah, very good. Let's see here. I would actually like to hear a little bit more about your interview with Kitty Bennett. I thought that was fascinating. She's with the West Texas Aphasia Center, right? Which, can you describe a little bit more about how aphasia affects a person? And then, secondly, did she mention any solutions or ways that they counsel families to try to move forward with the disability? As you mentioned, like, don't get stuck in thinking constantly about how the person used to be, or if you are the person, don't get stuck in your old life. You got to learn to move forward. Did she talk a little bit more about kind of how they counseled families regarding that, or gave them solutions for that, I guess?
So people with aphasia can't communicate or comprehend like the way they used to, and so she mentioned these like little books that they would make of like the person and like just like describing that person who has aphasia, because they can't tell people about themselves anymore, and so they make little books to do it. And she didn't talk very much about the families, just that they can get stuck, and it's more harmful to the patient when they do get stuck, and sometimes like they won't they'll stop talking to the person.
Okay. All right. Very good. Let's see here real quick. Okay, this is kind of around the idea of nostalgia. What traditions do you value and why? Maybe family traditions. You're about to go to a college that is very, tradition oriented. What traditions do you value and why do you value them?
Every Christmas we watch this one movie that makes us laugh, and it's called Daddy's Home 2. it's kind of a Christmas movie, it's kind of not. But ever since we watched it in the theaters, we always watch it, and we laugh together as a family. But don't watch the first one.
Okay.
Just
the second one. All right. All right. Very good. All right. I think I'll pass it on.
Libby Ann, in preparation for this thesis, you have 2 older siblings who have been through this process. Because of your comparison of the autobiographical memory and nostalgia, did they offer you any advice from one point of view or the other?
Yes, my sister heard me say this a bunch of times before, and she just gave me a little advice about inflection and stuff like that.
Okay. So did she have warm, fuzzy feelings from her thesis?
She didn't say, but I'm assuming she was pretty optimistic about it.
Okay. What about Will?
I didn't talk to Will as much about it, but he talked for a really long time, and I know I didn't want to do that.
So in this, like, in both of these examples from your family history, like, you had kind of a really interesting speech because of technical difficulties and because coming in and trying to share, and then being a sound person and knowing, like, here's all these other thoughts that are going on. And so if you were to look back and come, let's say you visit someone else's senior thesis, would you have, when you come in the room and you see something, a trigger that would make you feel nostalgia for today?
What are you asking?
So when you come back, is there something from today that will be a trigger to make you feel nostalgia from your senior thesis?
I think just the word nostalgia will do it. Or, yeah. Every time I hear it, it always makes me think of it. Like, for the past week, anytime I heard that word, my stomach would drop. So, hopefully that doesn't happen after.
That turn warm fuzzies, right? Like, okay.
It'll change the negative to a positive.
Look, because you kind of chose this word, is nostalgia something that in the present moment we should be observing to pay attention for future benefit? Or is it something that just happens and we have zero control over it?
I don't think we should observe what we're doing in the present and be like, well, I'm going to be nostalgic about that one later. I think it's more something that just happens, like it gets triggered by, like, you smell something, you hear something.
Okay. So since all of that is kind of circumstantial and outside of our control, for nostalgia, is there a spiritual application or something that we can use nostalgia for? Because we can't really control, this is going to be the thing that gives me a positive memory, where having faith and investing in the disciplines of spirituality is for us to be able to rely on that. And so how does it work with what God's Word says? How do you see nostalgia being applied to biblical principles or what He's calling us to do as believers?
Well, I think He made us have nostalgia for a reason. And I think, like, we can be nostalgic about little stories in the Bible. Like, you see a rainbow, you might think of Noah's Ark, or you see bread and wine together, you might think of communion. And, like, He says to do it in remembrance of Him. So I think it ties together.
Okay. And I've got one more question that I'm just curious about is, within all these aspects of nostalgia, they have a great response to us. Nostalgia builds belonging and kind of the social connections. Can we share nostalgia with other people? Or is it only something you can experience?
I think it's from your own personal experience, but if you share that experience with another person, then I think y'all can be nostalgic together about it.
Okay. Interesting.
But you might have different views about that experience.
Okay.
So it won't be the exact same.
Can you give me an example from your time at MCA that you would place in that category?
Like, to two different views.
A shared nostalgia. Mrs. McQueen has had you in classes from 8th grade on. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the one you would come up with first, but...
I have one from our time together.
Is this going to be a positive, warm fuzzy that I have? Okay.
Well, so when we were in rhetoric, when I was a sophomore, I came in late because I had sneezed gum into my hair. It got stuck. And then you used that as an example of that rhetoric. So that was, it was negative at the time, but you thought it was hilarious.
I have warm fuzzies every time I bring that up. So, thank you.
Are you going to think of that every time you get gum in your hair? And how often do you get gum in your hair?
I sneeze. I'm very careful.
I want to go back for a minute to this idea of Mr. Zinkgraf asked, like, so should I be in the present thinking about creating nostalgic moments for the future? It seems like social media is a little obsessed with this idea, although they might not call it this. I just think of like influencers trying to create this perfect moment that then everybody else will want to go out and create this perfect moment. Like, what do you think about that? And does that relate to what we're talking about?
I don't know. I think everyone likes different things, so when influencers do it, and people are like, oh, I want to try that, they may as well, but they may not like it.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
I feel like, is there this balance between living life authentically, or is there a contrast between living life authentically and going around trying to create these, I would say maybe even sometimes fake, beautiful moments?
Yes, I think, like, if you're trying to create nostalgic memories, then it's pointless. Because the memories you're nostalgic about are the ones that mean the most to you. And so if you're trying to do it, then that probably won't mean a lot to you later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That's just a question I thought about as Mr. Zinkgraf was asking you. But I want to go back to this. You know, one of the things that you're asked to do in your thesis is to examine whether this idea has any spiritual value. And I think you answered this a little bit, but I just want to talk about that a little bit more. So, like, what do you think the spiritual value of nostalgia is?
I think when we go through our day, we can be nostalgic about pieces of the Bible, and it can remind us to think about God more during our day.
Do you think that it has to be specifically biblical to have spiritual value?
No. I think, like, you can, like, go through your day and think of things that may not be from the Bible, but remind you of God still, and, like, what He's done in your life, and, or people He's put in it.
Yeah, do you think, you know, you talk about how most nostalgic memories have this relational, social aspect to them, that they're often attached to a person. Do you think, as opposed to it being attached to a person, it can be attached to an experience you had with God?
Yeah. I mean, like, the moment you decide that you believe in Him is pretty momentous for Christians, and so I think you can be nostalgic about that moment.
And that, I think before you studied nostalgia, I would have thought pretty flippantly about it. that there's not a lot of depth to it. But after us having conversations about it all year, it feels like there can be a lot more depth, and that it can be something that grounds you almost if you choose to let it do that. So one of my favorite parts of your paper, because we keep coming back to this idea that it can make us go from negative to positive. But you also talk about in your paper about how it can remind you who you are. So how do you think it reminds you who you are?
I think, like, some experiences, like, make our personality or show our personality and, like, who we want to be. And so when we remember those, we remember how we want to act.
Yeah, one of my other favorite parts of your paper is the verse you used from Hebrews. It was a verse that in my upbringing was used to make me feel guilty about missing church, which I do not think is why it was written.
Probably not.
And when you didn't tell me you were going to talk about that in your paper. I just read it when you turned in the final copy, and I think that you used it in a way that did fit its true intention. That God doesn't call us together. It's not about keeping a rule. It's about we all need community and we need these relationships. And nostalgia can remind us of the importance of those connections. And so when I am lonely, or there's a time later on in life where those connections don't feel strong, I can remember what God has done in me through those relationships in the past. And I can kind of grasp onto that and be reminded that He can do that again, and He can continue that. So that was just some of my favorite things that you said that I took away. So do you think, I know we said we can't create our nostalgic moments, but I want to know, like, what do you think will be meaningful to you? What memories will be meaningful to you? What will you remember from your time here as you go forward? Like, what are some of the things that you've learned that you want to keep in mind, maybe when things get hard in college, or things get hard after you graduate from college and you don't have the same kind of community around you?
Okay. I think I'll think about the community I had and try to find it wherever I am, and remember that I can still be friends with my teachers in college, even though it may be a little more difficult. What was the question?
The question is, what will you remember? Like, what things did you learn that you'll take with you?
I'll remember, like, the fun moments in class, like the one I mentioned earlier, and remember hanging out in y'all's offices. I'll be way too much. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Okay. How long have you been at MCA?
Since 7th grade.
Oh, since 7th grade. Okay. see any application there or ways to see any connections there?
Yeah, I think like wanting it to grow and nostalgia might counteract, because if you want to keep it small, you can't really do that. And think about the past, because it's going to change, and it can't be the same if it's bigger. Like, the culture will change a little bit, so you can't want it to be exactly how it is, because it'll have to be good for that time and not the same good that was in the past.
Okay. And how might nostalgia also be beneficial to new people coming in to hear about the good old days?
You remember the culture that was here and how you can be friends with someone that's 2 years older than you or 2 years younger, and it's normal, because I feel like that doesn't happen at other places.
Yeah. So one thing that's kind of intrigued me, like this year, being a Greece and Rome teacher and getting to teach Great Books 1, and I actually kind of encountered some of these ideas from a classical sense this year. And the emphasis on nostalgia, first of all, if you think about the Odyssey, Odysseus' name and even Achilles' name are both closely related to ache and pain. And nostalgia, as you mentioned, the two Greek words that it comes from, actually kind of hit at this kind of universal just ache for home. And if you just stop there for a moment, at least as I'm learning about this, I've kind of come to realize that when you observe a universal experience, kind of that just points to what it means to be human. Like, we have this ache for home. You don't want to get stuck there. But I was just wondering, we as Christians, with the story that we live in, is there a way that God can use that? Is there something maybe that we can share that others can't to help them understand why they have that ache for home? What do we? Sometimes nostalgia obviously can be about remembering the past, but often in Israel, like the Israelites were encouraged to remember what your future holds. I've given you these promises in the past. Look towards the future. So what are we promised about where we're going to be in the future, and how does that kind of maybe relieve that ache?
We're promised heaven, and so I think we all want to get there eventually.
Yeah.
But it's in God's timing, not ours.
Yes. Yeah. So it might even help someone realize that ache that you have is telling you something that's real about the world, right? That Jesus is going to return. There is going to be a new heaven and new earth, and that home will finally be realized. But yeah, he's the only way to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. Let's see. Okay. Again, thinking about these ideas of memory and time kind of come up as we study like great books and philosophy, and we're always encouraged to think about past, present, and future. So, The Office. Do you watch The Office?
I have.
Okay. So, in the final season, Andy Bernard makes a really great statement. He says, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Would you say the good old days are the past? Are they the future? Or could they be present?
I think they can be all of them, but you're not going to call them the good old days if they're like the present or the future. But you're going to have good days in the past, present, and future, and memories that mean a lot to you. You just may not know what those are yet.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
You illustrated, and in some of Mrs. McQueen's questions, you kind of pointed out that This is a sensory experience in this earth. And because of nostalgia, we are reminded who we are. And so, thinking of that, do you feel like the modern use of technology is going to cause nostalgia to become something that is extinct or hinders future generations from experiencing it? Since in a lot of cases, some technologies limit the sensory experiences and replicate it.
Okay. I think technology may cause like moments to be maybe less momentous because they're like instead of having fun with your friends, you might just be playing on your phone, and you're not really gonna be nostalgic about playing on your phone. But I think it can also like music is a big thing that can trigger nostalgia, and technology we use music for, so a little bit of both.
Okay. Well, as a classical school, who God is, who we are, what are we supposed to do with these ideas, is a major idea that we're tracking down and discussing. And so nostalgia, I would echo the other panelists in that it was like, oh, that's the warm fuzzy feelings. Okay, I don't know what value that has within the classical ideas, but I think a lot of your connections of nostalgia to who we are and us learning who God has created us to be instead of a modified or edited self that we come up with are helpful things. And so I appreciate your thoughts today. This time, you have an opportunity to kind of ask some questions and extend the conversation if you would like.
Okay, the question I have for y'all is, this is for everyone. What is a song that makes y'all feel nostalgic, and what's the memory that's associated with the song?
So I wouldn't say that it's one specific song, but for me, growing up, my dad had me listening to Southern gospel music all the time when I was a kid, which, so really anything, and I know most of the students here will not probably know what I'm talking about, but just good old Southern gospel quartet singing, and anything Bill Gaither, Gaither Homecoming, just brings back a lot of great memories of family reunions and sitting around listening to family members singing, and of course, singing about our Lord. So.
I'm hoping that Mrs. McQueen's answer is a great one to end this on. When I was a junior in high school, we were down on the coast, a buddy and I, and he had a Jeep. And we had a baseball tournament to come back to. And we bought a 6-pack of Jolt soda, which is like 2 times the caffeine, because that was a smart choice for a junior in high school. And then we rode back shirtless from the coast to New Braunfels, also a smart thing.
This is good detail.
Yeah. And he, for some reason, was listening to the song, and it was like, there goes Tokyo, here comes Godzilla. And he was just like screaming it. And so I had never heard this song before in my life. The effects of the car ride in the song were nausea, not like good memories. And then we got to the baseball field, 3.5 hours later, and we had sunburns. And so I had to catch a double header with a sunburn and only caffeine in my system for the whole day. And it was like the dumbest thing probably, that week,
that I did. But like when I think back on it, I hear that song and I'm like, oh, that was fun. It was not, but my mind thinks it was. And so that would be my answer.
I don't really know how I'm supposed to top that story. I have so many thoughts because I also love music. I listen to music constantly. I'm thinking of the story I told in chemistry last week about the song and going, should I tell that story? But I'm going to say the one we talk about frequently is during this whole process, I was driving to school one day, and I think I was maybe a bit discouraged, and randomly an old Amy Grant song came on the radio. And pretty much all things Amy Grant will kind of take me back to a place that's bittersweet. It takes me back to a place that was sometimes a little bit lonely, but also a place where I learned deeply who I was and that God loved me. And so when I hear Amy Grant, I'm very much reminded of who I am. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.